Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're back in Pennsylvania with someone who's been in the sport since the 70s, but just started casually and didn't know that running would become a giant, complete part of her life, instrumental in changes in the sport in terms of women running in the Olympics. And of course, the Runner's Gazette for decades. Many of you may have read your own name or other people's name and followed the sport. Welcome today on the podcast, Freddi Carlip. Hi, Freddi.
Hi, Matt. It's wonderful to be here.
Let's introduce you with your personal origin story of growing up and your outlook on athletics. What was life like when you grew up, and what was it like for a woman and being a sports person at all?
Women, when I was growing up, which was in Northeast Philly, just didn't do sports. And if they did, we looked at them as if they were odd. Our lives were about social things. I had no desire to do any activity. I was terrible in gym. People made fun of how I ran. And when I had to run, like getting a bus or something, I had no interest whatsoever. Women at that time weren't encouraged to do any kind of physical activity.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Northeast High School in Cottman and Algon in Philly.
So what happened with you after high school, starting a family and what you were doing?
I graduated from Temple University with a degree in teaching, which was very common then. Got married and tried to play at being the best housewife I could, because that's what I was raised to do. We moved a lot because of my husband's job. When we were in New Jersey, we lived in Sparta and Lake Mohawk. And I was losing my mind with two small children. And my husband was very athletic. He was the athlete in the family. He said, "Why don't you go out and run?" Okay, didn't tell me what to do. I put on tennis shoes, a maternity bra, a cotton t-shirt, and just normal shorts. There was about 1.5 mile loop. It was hilly. And he told me not to stop. But when you're not a runner, you can't just start running and continue. After about, I don't know, a quarter mile, my lungs were killing me. So I walked and I ran and I walked and I ran. I kept it up, and then we moved again to Lewisburg, PA, where I live now. And there was a group. Running was just starting to hit a peak with women getting into it. I was very interested in running in general, watching it, the Olympics, track and field, you name it. I loved it. But running for me, never, until I really started, because there was a group of women. Our kids were home. Our husbands watched them before they went to work. We went out early in the morning and did a 2-mile loop. And somehow I was able to run the whole thing. It was more social than anything. There were no times. But then I got my first pair of running shoes. I got Brooks Villanova. And
We've all had them. If we ran through the blue ones,
yeah.
yeah. They handed those out at IUP. Everybody got a pair of freshman day. Yeah. This was 78, 79, your first
Yes.
2-mile loop. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And
what about the memories? Just give me one memory as a fan of track. Was that for you before the 76 Olympics? What do you remember the first kind of fandom?
The 72 Olympics.
Okay. Right.
Of course, there was tragedy, but I remember watching Dave Waddle with the white cap, and I just loved watching him run. I remember watching women, but I don't remember the names as much because they weren't featured as much. I watched the 76 Olympics, I watched track meets, and then kept doing that, and it just sparked something. And the what they called the running boom was starting in the late 70s, Jim Fix. The thing was to run a race. And after running only 2 miles socially, there was a 10K that was being put on by the JCs here. We thought, okay, we're going to go and do this race. Never run more than 2 miles. And everybody the group of women, out of the group of 5, only 2 of us decided to do it. Our husbands were in it, but of course, we were in it by ourselves. We talked, we walked. It was very hilly. We ran. We got almost to the finish. We were the last 2 women.
That's great. Do you remember anything about the admin of that race? Do you remember, was there a fee, a T-shirt, time
There,
picnic? Yeah,
there was a T-shirt, the Bull Run 10K. There was a fee, nothing like the fees today, maybe $5.
yeah.
The age groups for women were terrible. Not that we expected to win, but there was under 35 and over 35. That was it. But that didn't
For the
matter.
dating, maybe that was for the dating profile of all the men there.
You're right. You're right. But boy, were we proud of ourselves. And that was my opening. Yes.
How did you feel after completing 10 kilometers run, walk, and did you think you'd run another race?
I didn't at that time. It hurt too much. But I the more I went, because we kept still running our 2 miles, but I knew I could do more. I ran off and on, but not in the winter. 79, a group of us decided to form a running club. And for some reason, when we got together, there were about 15 of us, I was nominated for president. This was highly unusual, a woman president of a running club. The guys were certainly better runners than I was, but I was thrilled that they wanted me to head this club. That was all I needed. I was hooked and ran my next race in April, which was our own Lewisburg 5 miler. We even used computers, which was very unusual. It was a high. It was wonderful. And I didn't walk. I did the whole
Oh,
thing.
nice. What was the mission of the club and the vision? Why did you form the club, and what was going to happen with it, did you think?
We were the Buffalo Valley Striders because we live in the Buffalo Valley. We wanted to have races for people in the community. We wanted to have events for people that were casual. We had a pizza run. We would run and then get pizza. Track meets. We would hold very informal track meets. We would have a long run on Saturday, which was really fun. I would usually be the only woman. That was okay. I loved bantering with the guys, and they were very supportive of me. It was wonderful. And then we decided to join the Roadrunners Club of America. We thought it was important to do that, to support grassroots running.
Let me just ask you about this organization. Organizing a road race then was fairly straightforward. There's a lot of moving parts, but a track meet can be even more complicated. You've got timers and finish line judges and access to a track. What do you remember about those attempts?
We used the Stinder track at our high school. That's all we had then. We did not have finish line judges. We had races for kids. We had a 2 mile, 1 mile, kids sprints, and it was mainly for fun, but they were timed and there was rivalry.
Right.
It was also great for training to run on the track.
Yeah. It's clear that you had a passion for the sport. People recognize some spark of leadership and energy from you. What about competitiveness?
I didn't know I was competitive until I began racing, and I really was. It brought out my competitive streak. And even though I don't really race anymore, I still have that. And that served me well. Back then, I heard comments because my husband was in the club, my late ex husband. and he trained me, which was not always great, but I had men say to me, actually, my dentist said to me, "You don't want to beat your husband in a race." This was the thinking. I was told that I shouldn't run because my uterus would fall out. I had 2 children, and the kids seeing me doing this was such an inspiration for them because we schlepped them to races, and they competed in the track meets. They helped with giving out water and stuff like that, and that was really good for them, and I was an oddity in this community. It's a very conservative community. Women just didn't do that. But I spoke to women's groups. I tried to get people, women especially, engaged.
Let's talk just about in 1980, the boycott. How was that? What was going on in life then, and how did that look to you?
I was very upset. I thought it was terrible because you are penalizing people that have trained for years for this may be their only moment. I thought it was wrong. And I had arguments, loud arguments about that, but that was my feeling. Most of the club members felt the same way, but people that didn't understand what it's like to be a competitor, to train for an event, they're the ones that thought it was the best thing that we could do to show Russia.
What was it about in terms of Buffalo Valley Road Runners Club and being part of the Road Running Club Association in America? What was the interaction there? One way, both ways? And what was going on then when you started? You said it was important.
They offered insurance, which became more and more necessary when you were putting on events. They offered support. We could try to hold state championships. We could have races that were sanctioned isn't the right word because that's really more for USATF, but races that were sponsored by Roadrunners Club. They had conventions that were wonderful to attend because you could talk to people that were doing what you were doing with big clubs, small clubs. Again, not a whole lot of women, but it didn't matter. Plus, we had state representatives, RRCA state representatives all over the country. I was chosen by, I think it was Harold Tinsley, the past president, to be the Pennsylvania state representative.
Okay, so
It's
you went from president of your local club and handpicked. What was your relationship with Harold?
With Harold, the board of the RRCA really kept their eye on the clubs all over the country and the people running the clubs. That's kind of, and for some reason, I caught Harold's attention. It was really a fun thing to do because you brought together representatives from every club. And we have a lot of clubs in this state, and we did back then. They come together and share ideas, talk about their own problems, all their successes, what it was like for them to put on races, etc. It was a great thing to do. I held a lot of state meetings, and then I was nominated to be Eastern Regional Representative for the RRCA. So I had clubs from all over the Eastern region, and we would have regional meetings.
What year did you move up to the regional leadership?
I would think it was 92 or 93. That's when I moved up, and that put me on the board.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit then in the earlier years. Who were some other key figures, and where were you on the age ladder of this? What meeting people doing what you were doing with the local running clubs? And the story of running clubs in America and how they really advocated, supported. In some cases, there's backstories. but the story of running America really to be told through the running clubs is very interesting.
I think the running clubs are what boosted running, not just watching the Olympics or hearing about Bill Rogers and Mary Decker and Joan Benoit, but about saying, hey, I can do this too. I can be in a race and I can just run with other people and not feel that I'm not good enough. That was especially true for women because many women would say to me, I don't think I can do this. People will look at me in shorts and jog bras. And you really learn to leave all those notions behind and just go out and do what you do. So running clubs, I think, boosted the running boom in this country.
Absolutely. Just one little bit of the identity. You talked about discovering your competitiveness. We have these roles that we're all lots of different people in different roles. You were a mother, a wife, a teacher, an executive in the club, and the Eastern region was not the end of your leadership climb there. I just want to talk about your identity change over there. Did you notice changes in yourself with the running, with the competing, with the leadership? What were the more significant moments or milestones for you?
Running gave me confidence. It was always my husband who had the spotlight. I didn't work per se until we bought Runner's Gazette because once I had children, I stopped teaching. So running gave me confidence. Also, that confidence carried over into public speaking and being able to talk in front of a group. It helped me on the roads, all that confidence. It helped me in daily life. I was not as afraid to do things, to take a chance. And there's a quote I love that I always think of: take risks. You're better off than being bored. And sure, you can go along, but if you don't take risks, I'm not saying something big, but in your own life, then if you don't take those risks, you don't grow.
It's nice. We had gotten you up into the early 90s, but Runner's Gazette, you got involved fairly soon after running. You knew about running, you had become a runner. You were a runner in your mind by then.
Yes.
So was it 1981? And why was Runner's Gazette available?
Runner's Gazette started in 1976, September, by Ed Gilday and Hayden Gilmore in Lansford, PA. Friends of ours who were runners, when we moved here, and when I started to get into running, you should subscribe. And so we did. And I even sent in an article or two about our local races. That was how we got involved with it. And then maybe it was 80, it was for sale. Talk about taking risks.
Yeah.
Somebody bought it before we could buy it from it. It was then in Medford, New Jersey, Medford Lakes, New Jersey, owned by Joe Wiggins and Harry Wiggins, I think his name was. And it focused mainly on New Jersey. And they did it for a year. And they put it on the market. So Harry and I said, let's do it. That was scary. Although I've always wanted to be a journalist and I love to write, never owned a newspaper before, and we got no help. Joe said, here, she gave us a shoebox of subscriber cards, 3x5. This is really before computers. And that was about it, a couple of ad leads.
I can imagine. It was scary to go ahead and do it. How scary was it for the first few months actually doing it?
It was very scary only because I loved to write. So now I had a platform. The mailing of it that was the hardest part, really. We used a typesetter. We bought a typesetter, free computer, CompuGraphic. A friend of mine and my mentor in journalism, Marcia Gorey, had just lost her job at the local newspaper, and she offered to do the layout.
How
And
lucky was that she
oh,
lost her job?
I know, I know. And she did it. I would give her like all the rolled up copy and say, "Here, but make it a newspaper." And she did.
Well,
She stayed with us for a long time, thank God.
what did you expect the feedback? What did you expect would come back from readers when you started?
I was hoping it would be positive, that they would be glad that the paper was still going. I know Ed Gilday was thrilled. We didn't know exactly what our focus should be. So we were doing a lot of national things because we were getting a lot of press releases, some local things. People started to ask about writing for us. There were a couple of people that did write. Gary Finelli is one. There were a few others.
Green, Bernie Green.
Yes. He had written for RG for many years, and he doesn't run anymore. He can. He teaches spinning, but he really gave a boost to the paper because he added such a quirky creativity to his columns, to his poetry. Then we did something where we doing short, and he was the informed runner, all of those things. And poetry, running poetry. You'd be surprised at the number of running poets. We had many back then, and George Hancock is still writing poetry because now we're only online.
Yeah, I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
where George is from. So I've
Uh,
I've I've interviewed George, and it's just fun. I was a high school kid when he was already an adult, and we ran. "Oh, yeah, no, we ran. I caught you up once. I was running mile repeats, and you didn't know who I was." And I said, "Come on, let's." Yeah, so it's pretty funny. People have been involved so long.
Yep.
The things that were going on from the early '80s then, we did have the women's marathon beginning. So how were those changes happening in the sport? You got in just as women's sport was really taking a dramatic change in the US and at the international level.
Yes. And I've got to say that the RRCA played a big role in that. We pushed for the women's marathon. We pushed for the 5K and the 10K. We held a series of races called the Women's Distance Festival to raise awareness of this. I don't think a lot of people in general knew why we didn't have those races for women, the discrimination of all of that. We really pushed, and to have the women's Olympic marathon made us for the RRCA and the club and as women. And then too, the pride we felt, and to see Joan Benoit just, whoa, that was amazing.
Yeah, it's like a storybook thing, the
Hmm.
Olympics in America, and this American hero, and
Jacqueline
yeah,
Hansen.
Jackie Hanson, yeah.
Is
I've
am-
talked to her about her role in this
uh,
too. Across the country, what did you think in the discussions when you were part of these pushing through the RRCA? Did you expect it to work? Did you expect a battle? What was it like?
There was a battle, and we had a couple of people that were involved in the RRCA, not on the board, they had been, but they were very influential behind the scenes. They knew who to talk to, they knew who to press to make this happen. Yes.
Let's talk about the Runner's Gazette and taking a subscriber list and then getting the results and the change in communications and technology that allowed you to adapt over the decades. What were the big challenges and surprises and changes that happened? And bumps, challenges, were there more risks along the way?
Not as many risks except technologically. We couldn't even find a printer but we did. We found the Danville News in Danville, Pennsylvania. The publisher, Don Jeffrey, took a chance on us, and the people that worked for him have become very good friends. What they did for us was just incredible because we didn't know. I didn't understand what a halftone was. I didn't understand about non-reproducible pens, all of these things, layout sheets, light tables. No one that's not in the business would have thought of that. So the hardest part was learning on the job, so to speak, but luckily having mentors to help along the way. When we switched in 86, we got a computer. That was my husband's field. It was as if we moved into the sunlight. It didn't take me that long to learn to get fluent on a keyboard and to work on a computer. And that was such a big help. It was a help with the subscriber list. It was a help with copy, getting people to send their articles. And of course, it got easier and easier when we could do everything on the computer and people could just send things, they could download them, and makes it so much easier. And same with photos.
What was your workload? Do you remember how much time it was taking, say, in 81 and then in 86? And how
Well, in 81, because we had Marcia doing her layout and the Danville News guys helping with that end of it, all I had to do was get everything together, do the proofing and the editing, write a column, a monthly column. And because of that, it made it easier, but it was the mailing. We didn't have a mailing house. It was Harry and I. Then we found people to help us, but that would be a long night. And then to schlep the bags to the post. Oh my God. Yeah. In 86, our life got easier because of the computer and easier still as technology advanced. And that helped us so much. In those old days, there were nights when we were up very late, and especially using a CompuGraphic typesetter, it didn't have memory beyond one line. You made a mistake, you had to go back. We used to develop the film in our bathtub. Isn't that lovely? All the
Right.
chemicals. So it took a lot of time. Plus, we'd go out and cover races, go to the RRCA conventions. But as the writers list grew, it got easier because we had people sending us information, stories, and our calendar grew too as we grew. And people loved our calendar. We put in races that maybe had small turnout, but they were important to the people that put them on and ran them. We considered ourselves very grassroots.
Did the feedback and your feeling a connection to the subscribers change with this as time passes? Some people probably feel they know you through the columns every month. How did that connection feel and grow as time passes? You get people that are brand new that you've been doing it for a year and then a decade, and someone picks up their first issue. So, how did that feel?
I love connecting with the subscribers. I really did. Back then, of course, it was either in person or phone and also mail. And I loved it. And there were complaints. There were people that said, "You're in Pennsylvania. Why are you covering races in Maryland?" But we wanted it to be mid Atlantic more than Pennsylvania. We wanted to keep that balance going. But mostly we had people were so positive and so happy. I think after Browning Ross, who was one of my mentors, believe it or not, because he contributed a lot to RG. After he stopped doing his running log, that's when Ed Gilday felt that the void was there for a more grassroots publication. And since he was in the newspaper business and a runner, he was able to start it.
What happened with your running? How did your running go after that first 10K and then in the 90s you had Villanovas? What happened with you and how consistent were you? And injuries and races while you were publishing?
I don't know how I did it. Of course, I was a lot younger, but I trained hard. I trained hard, sometimes running twice a day, going on the track once a week, running long runs, entering races. For some reason, my kids, they sometimes would mind. This is a funny story. My kids would say to me, Mom, are you the editor or are you mom now? And so I have buttons, one that said mom, one that said editor. So they knew not when not to bother me. I would be in the middle of getting the issue prepared for press, and I'd have to give my kids a spelling check because they had a test coming. So it was that too. And as they got older, they worked on the paper, which was a big help. Even though they grumbled a lot, they now feel that working for Runner's Gazette, seeing me running, seeing my writing, all I did for the RRCA, that really meant a lot to them, and it was inspiring for them.
Let's talk about your run in leadership of the RRCA and the local Buffalo Valley Running Club. How long were you head of that?
I was head of it. Let's see, it started in 79, about 8 years.
Okay.
A lot of our members are from Bucknell because Bucknell is here. And they would move on or they would get injured. And the club started to lose members. We tried to keep it going and other people took it over, but it was never the same. I want to go back to you asked me about injuries. I had a very bad stress fracture that I kept running on, which was dumb, but I finally got it checked and I had to stop running for 6 weeks. And I was not fit to live with. I was so upset, my poor kids. Then I was in the Philadelphia Distance 5K and I tore a muscle in my leg. I could hear the rip, but I wouldn't stop running. I had to cross the finish line. So those are the kinds of injuries, and knee injury after the Harrisburg Marathon. But I have to say, I'm very lucky that I've never had anything that has kept me down for a long time.
Yeah. Let's cover your leadership
Okay.
role and moving from the regional. How long were you the regional director and then your move into national leadership?
I was regional director for 2 years. You have 2-year terms only. We have term limits. Then I ran for VP. Then I was elected to vice president. And the normal progression would be for president, and it was. And in '04, I was elected president of the RRCA, and that was momentous. Or no, 2000, I'm sorry. Term was till '04.
Yeah. Let me just get this. There's some organizations like Toastmasters. There'll be a slate of second vice presidents, and one of them becomes first vice president. Once you were vice president, was it normal to go on, or was there a competition at that level? You basically were, it was yours not to mess up and keep going?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Who were some of the names people might recognize from that time of the late '90s who were involved? Known names, runners, like elite runners or names that you interacted with before you took leadership?
Yes. Don Cardong, who was president. Actually, I took over from him. Henley Gabot, Bill Stewart, Jeff Darman, Carl Sniffen, Jerry Kokesh. These are names that go back a lot of years. Larry Rawson was on our board.
Any women in your list?
Henley and Jane Dolly was president.
Okay.
Nancy Hobbs, she's very big with ultra running. Laura Kolsick. There were more men, but there were women also.
Yeah. So inside the RRCA, as the role of taking over as president, are you supposed to have a vision? You're supposed to maintain? What is your charge and how risky or scary or fun was that?
It is to maintain and to have a vision to move forward and how to move forward. And I did. I had to give an acceptance speech and I laid it all out in that. Catherine Switzer was the keynote speaker at that year when I was elected. And she's a good friend, and she was then. So she was thrilled to have me do this. And she loved my speech. I can't even remember it now, but it was scary running my first meeting. Not that I didn't know how it would go, and I knew everybody. It was easy because, again, I had people that were very much behind me and they wanted to see me succeed. It wasn't as hard as I thought, and I really got into it. I had to travel a lot, which I didn't mind because that meant I got to meet people. I loved meeting people in clubs and I loved the conventions because we could do that. We did have some problems down the road in my tenure, unfortunately, and it did cast a shadow on my leadership. I have to thank Tom Ford. He was very big in the Delaware area and running. He was my treasurer. And thanks to him, we were able to get beyond it, bring the club together again, and move forward. But that was a very hard time. I was going through a divorce. I had this to deal with. Oh,
Wow.
but I'm through.
Well, let's talk about the sport itself from that
Mhm.
term. You were fully in it from the early 80s. And of course, through then, performance enhancing drugs came up in North America and all over the world, but certainly in among some of the superstars and the cereal box types. How was that something that Gazette dealt with, and the RRCA compared to the ATF as a regulatory body? How did all that fit into the mix?
We put out statements. We were against it and position papers. We couldn't do more than that because that would be USATF and WADA. We worked with Frank Shorter on that because he was very active in WADA back then. And that was how we dealt with that. And I wanted in RG to have people, whatever their thoughts were in this, I'd like to see a little give and take. Most people were against it, but they love blood doping for some reason. Because of laissez viren, they all wanted to try blood doping. That they felt okay about, but
Yeah.
they didn't consider that in the same realm.
Yeah. The way I remember it, he never really said, "Yes, I did." He just
And
didn't say, "No, I didn't."
like, no, oh, I
So that's a
know.
good, maybe there was some psychological game there, but that's true. That's a big factor. As you were having RG go through these, was it gonna just go forever for you?
I wanted it to. I wanted to. The problem that I ran into in the 2000s, maybe around 2012, 2015, and still kept it going, still got advertising, still got new subscribers, but nothing like it had been. The costs for mailing were through the roof, and it was getting harder for me to just try to do it all. That is when I decided no more print, which made me very sad. And I went to strictly online. And I've got to say that Clay Shaw and Karen Mitchell have been by my side with that. And Clay has been with RG almost since the beginning and they do amazing work. And I was Miss Road Manners, which I still am.
Miss Road Manners. Tell us about it, where the idea came from and what it was like.
Miss Road Manners. This was during the time in the 90s or the early 2000s when we had the Penguin and we had the slow running movement and we had people that did not know how to run in a race, run on the roads, run on the track. I was then vice president of the RRCA, and Don Cardong said that I would be great if I could do something with this. So I just developed the persona of Miss Road Manners based on Miss Manners who writes etiquette. I wore white gloves with my running clothes. When we had our RRCA publication footnotes, I would write a column of Q&A, and at first I had to make up the questions. That would be ongoing. I would use the RRCA and RG to talk about Miss Road Manners. I wrote a whole list of Miss Road Manners on the road track and trail. Most people were very happy to see it, some were not. I got a lot of not nice, I'm not going to say hate mail, not nice email and comments from the slower runners group.
Oh,
They felt they were being attacked by fast runners and they were just happy to be on the road, but I never said they shouldn't. I also got questions about running with baby joggers and not being careful because when I started racing, my kids did not go in a race with me. They either had a sitter or someone watching them at the race. People didn't like that. There was a column in the New York Times. They were writing about all of this and how these slower runners were saying very disparaging things about me. One wanted me to trip over something in a race.
oh my God.
I saved, yes.
All the way from the beginning, everyone who's run high school track knows you're doing an interval and somebody's in the way, you yell track and people move back. And
Right,
when we're talking about this basic stuff that people who were not ever training might not be aware of, and you took a kind of a lighthearted
right.
approach to say, let's talk about this stuff. Yeah. You can hear the animosity because, yeah, I, one thing that reminds me, I remember maybe it was the Barcelona Olympics, the opening ceremony. And I remember watching it and said, okay, here's something that everyone's going to agree on. That was just great. And I opened the paper the next morning and the headline was, what a bunch of rubbish they did. So
Uh,
there's always going to be another
yes.
angle and someone not appreciating. How did you deal with those?
I kept the persona going and tried to keep it light and didn't get into a contest going back and forth. I said, you're entitled to your opinion, but here are the reasons you have to be careful on the road. It's for your sake and others. I had the Penguin, John Bingham. Who was it? Actually, was it the Marine Corps Marathon? I think so. Maybe it was at one of our conventions. They were going to do a head to head. I can't remember the guy's name, wrote for the Washington Times because he was an older runner like me and we remember, but they were very good about it. And I was the moderator. They wanted me to keep peace. And that was really fun because you're keeping a lighthearted approach. That was the important thing. But people felt like they were being attacked and they weren't. John Bingham was very supportive of my comments, but I could not believe the number of people who didn't understand basic common sense. That's what it was all about. I didn't know any of that when I started running. Why did I know to run against traffic? And now when I'm out, I see people running with headphones with traffic. Headphones are another one. That was something Miss Road Manners also didn't approve of.
You can wear a headphone. You need to keep one ear open, and it is driven by women's safety,
Yes,
not courtesy.
you're
Oh,
right, it is.
yeah.
Yes. I love doing Miss Road Manners. And even after I was no longer president, I was still doing Miss Road Manners. And I still do it. If people want Miss Road Manners to write something or help with something, she will, because I loved it. It was fun and it was spreading a very important message.
Yeah. I always thought it should be a morning cartoon.
Great idea.
Let me just say, you teacher, mom, wife, runner, competitor, leader, executive. How about pioneer? Do you feel that fits you?
I think it does. Now, I didn't at first because I didn't know what I had done to deserve that. But now I have certainly come to believe I am a pioneer, and I'm grateful to have had that opportunity.
The whole running community is grateful that you took the opportunities that you did and contributed so many ways that you did. How was letting go? I know it was a mixed experience leading the RCA. How was letting go of that as a leadership, and what did you do after? Once you're president of the RRCA, not much more to aspire to build your CV or thing, but I know you're busy with various things, but how was that?
It was tough. I was on the board of USHEF. It was hard. It's a big change. It was hard to get back to being just, and I say that, but I don't really mean it, just Freddi Carlip with RG. I think it was RG that kept me involved, kept me thinking, hey, okay, so that part is over, but you still have this. So that was a big help.
What about the people that have come through? I was overseas for from kind of mid '80s until 2004. I was connected to the U.S. and certainly the sports world, but I lived in the Middle East. I lived in Egypt for 15 years. There was a dark ages for me for getting publications and everything that I caught up on in batches later. At what point did you think about the legacy of RG, what you had accomplished, and you could see the inevitable changes to print is just not a feasible thing for so many print entities in any arena. How did that go? And is that part of your identity as a publisher, as a writer, as a leader, all that morphing as we all do over our life? How did that go as you see the changes, and how do you feel about the legacy of it then?
I feel good about it. I don't feel my work is finished. I don't dwell a lot on what I've done. I can look back and say, oh my God, really? I know it's there. I've been asked about writing a book or writing a memoir, and I've thought about it. But I'm busy now, still involved not only with RG, but with another big running project called Starting Line 1928, which is about women running pioneers. And there are three of us: Cindy Kuzma, Kara Hawkins, Jedlicka, and me. And it's under the auspices of Gary Corbett. We interview running pioneers. I was interviewed by one of our people. We talked to them about what you're talking to me about, because there are so many women runners beyond Catherine Switzer and Joan Benoit, Greta Lee, all of them that people do not know about, and especially African American women who have done so much. So that is our focus. That also brings me a lot of joy to be able to do that and keep working, not only in the sport, for women.
My understanding is it's an oral history approach to capture and share. Who thought of it? And how did 4 or 5 people come together and get started?
Gary Corbett, he and I have worked together over the years a lot, and his father too. I'm happy to say I can call him a friend. Gary and Ted is so much like his dad. He put the call out. Are there any women that would like to do this? And explained it. He had already wanted me to do it. So we were looking for others. There was another woman involved, but she, due to constraints of her job, had to drop out. So it's basically just three of us, the three women. We meet once a month on Zoom. We go over women that we want to talk with for upcoming podcasts. We also do a written synopsis, and we use pictures. Kara and Cindy are much more technologically advanced than I am. They're also much, much younger. I've done intros, but they record everything, get it all ready, make it more professional than I could.
Is there anybody that stands out among the people you've talked to that says, boy, that's somebody that a film needs to be made about? Ken Burns needs to take this. There's so many people that have had influence, like you, the number of people you've personally had an impact on. And some of them you probably are not even aware of. But some of the people, that have that mix of personality, charisma, timing, and impact. Is there anybody that the people listening here say, oh, that's who I want to go listen to among your stories? Who are some of the highlights?
I can think of Jackie Hansen as one. I wish I had the list right in front of me because my mind is going blank. Elisa Harvey. These are women that should be better well known than they are. Oh God, there's others that I cannot think of right now off the top by all of them. What some women have overcome to get where they got in the past. They've had so many hurdles. I think it's inspiring for men, women, anyone.
It's not a kid's telling, it's a
Mhm.
mature approach. But how young do you think is a good audience for that?
This is our audience is targeting younger women or men or transgender, whatever you are. So they can learn our history, which is very important to me because so many people don't know, runners that don't know running history. And to give recognition to women who had a place in running history that most people don't know about. And I would say the target audience would be younger runners, but we want every runner to be inspired by these stories.
Let's give all the titles, website, taglines that people need to know. I'll put them on this website for you, but where should people go? They can go Runner's Gazette.
Yes, they can go to startingline1928.com. They can find us on Instagram at Starting Line. Those are the two biggest.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
there and you can find everything
Yeah.
else.
Right.
What have you kept over the years in your competition life? Medals, bibs, any cherished items from the athlete side of you that you still have?
Yes. I have all my trophies, all my medals, many bibs. There are certain races that stick out when I lowered a time and got a PR, when I've run out of the country in Israel and won a medal. And I didn't know it because I couldn't read Hebrew. I've got to say, with all of the conflict going on, when I ran in Israel in the peace run, 10K and half marathon, we had Arabs, we had Jews, we had Druze, we had UN peacekeepers, Ethiopians, Kenyans, people from all over the world, and we all got along. And wouldn't that be wonderful if that could still happen? So that means a lot to me. Running in Kenya, I didn't race, but I was part of a team of writers in the Safari Marathon and half, and I helped give out water and do all of that. That was wonderful being the team manager for our 2002 Ekiden women's team in Seoul, Korea. That was under the USATF flag, so to speak.
Some people aren't as familiar with that. It's EIKEDEN.
EN, yeah.
How long a trip was that for you to go over there?
I flew from the East Coast
Right?
to Los Angeles.
How far ahead of the actual racing time?
We were there about 3 or 4 days before we raced. We met at Los Angeles airport, our team, and we flew together. Then we were able to get settled in and tour and train. They trained in the halls. We trained with relay, passing the sash. And it was run very much like an Olympics. There was a closing ceremony, an opening ceremony. We're wearing all these official clothes. It was really exciting to be with women from all over the world, people that I might not associate with in general because I just don't go to their countries. A lot of Soviet bloc countries, and we all got along. The coaches, the Ukrainian coach gave me a bottle of vodka to take home. It was just wonderful. This is
Yeah.
where you learn to be with people that aren't always like you, may
Yeah.
have the same passion for the sport, but are different and have different cultures.
Yeah, this thing that we've shared as the challenges of being runners and things. That's very interesting. I did a triathlon in a lot, and I got a medal too in my
Oh,
age group. Yeah, and there were not so many foreigners. There was a bunch of European guys that were from the professional triathlon circuit, and then I did a shorter one. But my gosh, traveling overseas on these kind of things, you get the big fish, small pond.
yes, yes,
A VIP. If you never felt like you've been a VIP in your life, just go visit another country and say, I'd like to run in your race. Yeah.
that is very true. Those were all such amazing experiences that I will never forget. Also, some races in this country that I've done or that I've attended that have been just thrilling for me. Yeah, I think a lot of it is meeting other people. And that to me is a biggie. It really is.
Freddie, I've wanted to talk to you for a while. I'm glad we finally connected. When you talk about somebody for some reason saw something in me, it's obvious talking to you. You smile, laugh, look fondly, can reflect on the lessons, some of the bumps in the road, the challenges, and have lived a great life of contributing. I'm sure there are a lot of people that have been impacted that haven't had the chance to talk to you in person to talk about that. It's a great piece of history that you have, and I wish you ongoing great success with
Thank you.
the Women's History Project. And yes, I don't know, you just said, "How did I ever have time?" But write that book, get that film made. I think we'd all benefit from seeing your story.
Thank
So,
you. It's been a pleasure, Matt.
and it's just fun. It's very pleasant to talk with you, and
Thank you.
thank you very much for your time. I We can cut this out if you don't want. I know you had a little bit of bad experience with an injection, so you're not maybe not feeling that great, but thank you for your time and safe healing so you can get back
Thank
to
you.
every full strength.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very happy to do this. It was my pleasure and it was wonderful talking with you. You're an excellent host.
Okay, thanks, Freddie.
You're welcome.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.